For decades, fans saw Clint Walker and Jack Elam as complete opposites, the tall, soft-spoken hero and the wild-eyed outlaw who always stole the scene. But when Walker turned 90, he finally broke his silence about what really happened between them. What he revealed was nothing like the rugged cowboy friendship people imagined. It involved jealousy, betrayal, and a secret that followed both men long after the cameras stopped rolling. Once you hear what Clint said, you'll never look at their movies the same way again. Before Walker became a television icon, his life sounded like it had been pulled straight out of one of his Western scripts. Born Norman Eugene Walker in Hartford, Illinois in 1927. He grew up during the Great Depression, tall, shy, and built for hard work. Before Hollywood, he did almost everything. Factory jobs, merchant marine duty during World War II, even security work. Nothing about his early years was glamorous. Everything changed when his 6 feet 6 inches frame and calm, steady voice caught the attention of a Warner Brothers talent scout, leading him to Cheyenne, the series that defined his career. From 1955 to 1963, he played Cheyenne Bodie, the strong but gentle drifter who roamed the West, settling conflicts with both his fists and his moral compass. The show made him one of television's first true cowboy superstars, right alongside James Arness and Lauren Green. Viewers loved his natural charm and quiet authority, the kind of man who could handle a fight, but preferred to settle things with reason. In an era full of loud heroes, Walker stood out because he didn't need to shout to command a room. But fame had its battles. He was known for standing up for himself, especially when studio executives tried to push him around. He fought with Warner Brothers over pay and creative control, even walking away from Cheyenne at the height of its success. Fans were shocked, but the move earned him respect across Hollywood. He wasn't just a cowboy on screen, he lived by similar principles off-screen. After Cheyenne, Walker moved into film, appearing in The Dirty Dozen and The Night of the Grizzly. That's where he crossed paths with one of the most unforgettable faces in Westerns, Jack Elam. On set, they were an odd pair, Walker tall and stoic, Elam with his wandering eye and unpredictable humor. Their chemistry was remarkable, almost too good to be just acting. But as it turns out, the connection between them was far more complicated than audiences ever knew. Behind the camera smiles and cowboy camaraderie, something else was happening, something Walker wouldn't talk about until he was old enough to stop worrying about. Hollywood secrets. Jack Elam was the kind of actor no one ever forgot. Not because of his name, but because of that unforgettable face, the wild off-center eye, the crooked grin, and the unpredictable energy that made him hilarious and terrifying at the same time. Before he became one of Hollywood's most recognizable villains, Elam had lived a life that was anything but easy. Born in Arizona in 1920, he lost sight in his left eye after a childhood accident involving a pencil. Instead of letting it stop him, he turned it into his greatest weapon. That unmistakable stare became his calling card, helping him build a career as the man every Western hero had to fear, or sometimes laugh at. Elam didn't jump straight into acting. He worked as a bookkeeper and even served as an auditor for film studios before getting his break in the late 1940s. By the 1950s, he had become the go-to actor for outlaws, drunks, and unpredictable sidekicks. He had that rare mix of menace and charm, someone who looked like he could rob you blind but might buy you a drink afterward. When The Night of the Grizzly brought Clint Walker and Jack Elam together in 1966, audiences got something special. Their contrast was cinematic gold. Walker with his commanding calmness and square-jawed heroism, and Elam with his wiry mischief and rough-edged humor. On screen, they clicked instantly, the straight man and the troublemaker, a pairing that felt made for the big screen. But off camera, things weren't so smooth. Crew members described the set as tense at times, because of how different the two men were in real life. Walker was disciplined, quiet, and serious about his craft. Elam lived by instinct, constantly joking, teasing, and stirring up chaos between takes. Some actors found his energy infectious. Others found it exhausting. And according to people who worked on the film, Clint Walker wasn't always amused. Still, something about their dynamic worked. They respected each other's talent, even if their personalities clashed. Over the years, they crossed paths in other Western projects and reunions, always leaning into the hero and drogue chemistry fans loved. But beneath those friendly appearances, a deeper story was unfolding, one that only came to light decades later when Walker finally talked about it. What he revealed wasn't just a behind-the-scenes tale, it was a confession about a relationship shaped by respect, resentment, and a single, unforgettable incident that changed everything. In the golden age of Westerns, fans liked to believe their favorite stars were just like their characters, loyal, fearless, and noble. But Hollywood even then had its share of rivalries, and Clint Walker and Jack Elam were no exception. The two men came from completely different worlds. Walker was a perfectionist who valued order and professionalism, while Elam thrived on unpredictability, the kind of guy who might show up late, crack a joke at the wrong time, and somehow still steal the scene. Their tension reportedly began during the night of the Grizzly. Walker, used to a tightly run set, grew irritated with Elam's habit of improvising lines or breaking into laughter during serious moments. Audiences saw natural chemistry. Walker saw chaos. Crew members remembered moments when he quietly pulled the director aside to ask for more control over the shoot. Elam, meanwhile, brushed it off and sometimes pushed boundaries further just to see how Walker would react. Still, the rivalry wasn't rooted in hatred. It was more complicated, almost like two brothers constantly testing each other. Walker respected Elam's raw talent, even if he didn't understand his methods. And Elam admired Walker's strength and discipline, even if he thought he took himself too seriously. But then the rumors started. Some claimed Elam publicly mocked Walker's serious demeanor in front of the crew, embarrassing him. Others insisted the two men confronted each other privately and nearly came to blows. Nothing was ever confirmed, yet years later, when Walker finally spoke about Elam, his words suggested there was more truth to those whispers than anyone knew. Though they continued to cross paths at Western conventions and interviews, there was always a subtle tension whenever Elam's name came up. Walker never criticized him outright, but his praise always carried an undertone, as if he respected Elam but couldn't quite forgive him. That quiet strain lingered for decades, hidden behind smiles and handshakes, until Walker reached his 90s and decided he was finally ready to speak honestly about what had happened between them by the time he turned 90. Walker was one of the last giants of television's golden Western era. He had watched the industry rise, transform, and eventually forget many of its early legends. He had outlived directors, co-stars, and even the studios that once made him famous. Age has a way of changing how people remember things, and Walker was no exception. In one of his final interviews, he spoke more openly than he ever had about Hollywood, about friendships lost, and about memories that stayed with him longer than he wished they had. When the interviewer mentioned Jack Elam, Walker's expression softened. For a moment, it looked as though he was deciding whether to finally reveal a truth he'd kept to himself for decades. Jack was one of a kind, he said quietly. You never knew what he'd say next, or what kind of day you'd get with him. But he had something special, something you couldn't teach. He paused, and the silence felt heavier than the words that came before it. Then he added, but Jack and I, we didn't part ways the right way, and that's something that still bothers me, according to those close to him. This referred to an incident near the end of filming the night of the Grizzly. Tension on set had reportedly reached a breaking point. Walker, known for his disciplined approach, felt undermined after Elam made a sharp remark during a heated moment. Some claimed it was a joke that crossed the line and embarrassed Walker in front of the cast and crew. Others whispered that Elam had repeated a personal story Walker had told him in confidence, something that was never meant to be public. Whatever happened, the two barely spoke afterward. Walker finished the film, did his scenes, and left. In later years, whenever he was asked about Elam, he gave polite but distant answers, angry but never warm either. For a man as private as Walker, that silence spoke volumes. When Jack Elam passed away in 2003, fans noticed Walker didn't attend the funeral. Most assumed it was because of health or distance, but years later, Walker admitted quietly, "Some things you keep between men. Not everything needs an audience. With those words, the myth of a perfect Hollywood friendship crumbled. Their story wasn't about anger or vengeance. It was about pride, regret, and the emotional blind spots of men raised to keep their feelings hidden. Walker acknowledged that both he and Elam were too proud to reconcile. "I think we both thought we had more time," he said. "That's the biggest mistake we make," Walker said. And hearing it from a man who built his life on quiet strength hit fans hard. For decades, he had played heroes who always made things right before the credits rolled. But real life doesn't come with a script or a second take. His confession showed that even heroes carry unfinished business, and even cowboys have ghosts. What made his words linger wasn't the sadness, it was the respect. He never spoke poorly of Jack. He never blamed him. He simply admitted that their friendship, like many in Hollywood, was complicated, and that sometimes the loyalty audiences believe in on-screen hides, quieter kind of heartbreak behind it. When word of Clint's revelation spread, it raced through the Western fan community. People revisited the night of the grizzly scene by scene, hunting for tension they had never noticed. Every exchange, every glance, every smirk seemed to carry new meaning. Suddenly, the movie wasn't just another Western. It felt like a window into a real story of pride and hurt. Some fans defended Elam, saying his humor and mischief were part of his charm, and that Walker simply took things too seriously. Others sided with Walker, arguing that his professionalism deserved more respect. The debate revived old Hollywood questions about discipline versus spontaneity, structure versus instinct. Two actors who lived by two very different codes. Film historians began examining their collaborations with new eyes. They noted how much their dynamic resembled the Western archetypes they embodied, the lawman and the outlaw, order and chaos, dignity and mischief. Their contrast had always been the source of their chemistry. But now, it felt personal, not just performance. Beyond the speculation, something deeper emerged. Fans saw Clint Walker's honesty as rare in an industry built on polished legacies. His willingness to speak about regret made him more human than ever. In a world that rewards vanity, he showed vulnerability. For many, that final confession reshaped his legacy. He wasn't just the towering, unbreakable cowboy anymore. He was a man who carried regrets and doubts. A man for whom loyalty mattered so much that an old wound could still sting decades later. Jack Elam's legacy shifted too. His chaotic humor, once just comic relief, took on a bittersweet tone. Fans began to see him as more than the wild-eyed villain. They saw a performer who masked insecurities with laughter, a man who turned a childhood injury into charisma, but may have struggled under that grin. Clint's story inspired documentaries, articles and tribute videos exploring their partnership. Younger audiences who had never seen Cheyenne or the Night of the Grizzly discovered the actors through online conversations. It was ironic that a truth spoken at 90 made two nearly forgotten stars relevant again, in a way. Walker's confession became one last act of storytelling, unscripted, unpolished, and real. Like many of his Western tales, the truth arrived quietly, late, but with undeniable impact. And it revealed something larger than the story of two actors. It exposed a generational flaw among Hollywood. Men who learned too late that silence doesn't heal. When people look back at classic Westerns, they tend to remember the dusty landscapes, the gunfights, and the stoic heroes riding into sunsets. But the story of Clint Walker and Jack Elam reminds us that what happened off camera was often just as dramatic as what played out on screen. It's a story about pride, friendship, and the quiet cost of fame, proof that even legends can be haunted by the words they never spoke. Walker's late life. Honesty gave audiences a rare glimpse into the emotional aftermath of being a public myth. For decades, he was cast as the perfect man, calm, brave, unshakable. But in his 90s, he revealed something far more human: vulnerability, humility, and the part of the cowboy that doesn't draw a gun but lowers his head and admits, "I wish I'd done it differently." Jack Elam's role in that story is just as human. Beneath the eccentric humor and the unpredictable antics was a man who had survived loss, overcome disability, and turned pain into performance. His laughter, in light of Clint's confession, feels almost tragic, like someone who kept joking because he didn't know how to say what he truly felt. Together. Their story shows how opposites can attract, collide, and leave marks that last a lifetime. Clint and Jack never made peace in person, but in a strange way. Walker's late-life revelation finished the story for both of them. It gave fans the kind of closure their films rarely offered, and maybe that's why people still talk about it. In an age of quick fame and easily forgotten stars, their unpolished, imperfect story endures because it feels real. It strips away the fantasy and reminds us that the people who played our heroes were just as fragile as anyone else. Clint. Walker's Truth at 90 wasn't just about a feud. It was about redemption. It was about realizing that saying something late is still better than never saying it at all. It was about understanding that even the strongest men sometimes wish they could turn back time for one more phone call, one more apology, one more honest word. Today, their old films still play The Night of the Grizzly, Cheyenne, and many more. But for those who know the story, something feels different now. The tension behind the smiles, the depth behind the eyes. Every look between them carries a weight that wasn't obvious before. Every shared line feels heavier, because now we understand what those quiet moments were hiding. That became part of Clint Walker's greater legacy. Not just as the towering hero who always rode into the sunset, as the man who admitted that real life doesn't always end neatly. Sometimes the toughest battles aren't the ones on horseback or in dusty towns, they're the ones fought privately, in the heart. At 90, Walker didn't just reveal a secret. He revealed a truth that many Hollywood stars take with them to the grave. Behind the fame, the cowboy hats, and the silver screens were men carrying pride, regret, and memories they never knew how to express. His confession about Jack Elam wasn't about assigning blame. It was about finding closure, and that's why the story lingers. It reminds us that even in the make-believe world of westerns, real emotions can't be scripted. Every smirk, every glare, every moment between Walker and Elam feels heavier now, almost like echoes of something too authentic to be just performance. So the next time you see them on screen, remember you're not just watching two actors. You're watching two men who lived, clashed, and carried a story they never fully shared until the very end. And for Clint Walker, speaking that truth at 90 became the last frontier he ever had to cross. Together, their story shows how opposites can attract, collide, and leave marks that last a lifetime. Clint and Jack never made peace in person, but in a strange way. Walker's late-life revelation finished the story for both of them. It gave fans the kind of closure their films rarely offered, and maybe that's why people still talk about it. In an age of quick fame and easily forgotten stars, their unpolished, imperfect story endures because it feels real. It strips away the fantasy and reminds us that the people who played our heroes were just as fragile as anyone else. Clint Walker's Truth at 90 wasn't just about a feud. It was about redemption. It was about realizing that saying something late is still better than never saying it at all. It was about understanding that even the strongest men sometimes wish they could turn back time for one more phone call, one more apology, one more honest word. Today, their old films still play The Night of the Grizzly, Cheyenne, and many more. But for those who know the story, something feels different now. The tension behind the smiles, depth behind the eyes. Every look between them carries a weight that wasn't obvious before. Every shared line feels heavier, because now we understand what those quiet moments were hiding. That became part of Clint Walker's greater legacy. It's not just as the towering hero who always rode into the sunset, but as the man who admitted that real life doesn't always end neatly. Sometimes the toughest battles aren't the ones on horseback or in dusty towns. They're the ones fought privately, in the heart. At 90, Walker didn't just reveal a secret. He revealed a truth that many Hollywood stars take with them to the grave. Behind the fame, the cowboy hats, and the silver screens were men carrying pride, regret, and memories they never knew how to express. His confession about Jack Elam wasn't about assigning blame. It was about finding closure. And that's why the story lingers. It reminds us that even in the make-believe world of Westerns, real emotions can't be scripted. Every smirk, every glare, every moment between Walker and Elam feels heavier now, almost like echoes of something too authentic to be just performance. So the next time you see them on screen, remember you're not just watching two actors. You're watching two men who lived, clashed, and carried a story they never fully shared until the very end. And for Clint Walker, speaking that truth at 90 became the last frontier he ever had to cross.